Sally, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here with you today. It would be much nicer to be in your weather than in mine.
Well, I'm just so excited to get to talk to you. This has been a dream of mine for a long time. I've always wanted to get to just chat with you, and now we get to share this conversation with so many others. You're just somebody that I have followed and learned from. I've read so many of your books and just love your heart. And, I think I just would say you are a mentor to me, a virtual mentor, we call it. And I love that. And I know you talk actually about the whole concept of mentoring, and you're so all about discipleship and mentoring. So before we jump in and get to share some of your life and experience with everyone, can you just give people a quick introduction to who you are and where you are?
Okay, I'm Sally Clarkson, very proud and happy mother of 4 adult children, who 3 of the 4 live in the UK, in England and Scotland, and one lives as an actor in California. So I spend all my time going back and forth to their places. I'm an author of 31 or 32 books, and
Wow.
I podcast, and I have moved 24 times, 9 times internationally. And I love words, tea, friends, walking, and home education. So this is going to be really fun today.
Oh, so much fun. This is the best. And I'm just imagining we're all, hopefully everyone can grab their tea or coffee and we get to learn a little bit from you. I actually was wanting to focus specifically on a book and I couldn't decide. I was like, I love too many of her books. So this is
Oh,
going to be a
so
big
sweet.
combination. But I want to just go back, for those listening who have kids at home, which I think is probably most, maybe some grandparents listening, we would love to just get a vision for what it was like when your kids were young, some of the things that you did, the routines in your home. Can you just paint a picture for us?
I will. I absolutely love parenting. I had no idea. I'd never changed a diaper, did not babysit, had only brothers.
Same here.
But oh really?
Yes, exact.
as as I began to seek the Lord when I was pregnant, and I had spent many years in discipleship ministry in Eastern Europe, and I loved the life of Christ, and I saw how he passed on a whole vision. It was through relationship, through serving them, teaching them, being their friend, living with them, walking with them. And so it was as though the Lord almost whispered in my ear when I first had my first child, you're holding eternity. You're holding significant, a human being who's going to have eternal consequences.
Yes.
How will you so love this child that they will know that I'm a God of love? How will you so shape this child that they'll have virtue and give them a biblical worldview? So it was kind of from my past in ministry that I came into parenting.
Yes.
But kind of to make a long story short, we don't have all day, it's been really fun for me. I have a daughter who lives in Oxford, and she has 4 children, 5 and under. And it's so fun to watch her. It's like watching me.
Yeah.
And the thing that I would say to young parents is you have more capacity than you really think, but establishing rhythms and routines is so extremely important. For instance, daily, when Sarah's children get up, and this is what I did too, but she has a whole pile of wonderful books that while they're occupied eating their whatever it is, scrambled eggs or cereal or whatever, she first has a devotion with them with these beautiful picture books and talks to them about it, and then she reads from these incredible, beautiful literary books. And they're so used to it, they'll just sit in their little chair for an hour, and they're 5, 3, 2, and a baby.
Wow.
But you establish patterns, and then they have, for instance, we used to do this too, but at 5 o'clock at night, she'll say, okay, it's time for cleanup, and I used to put a timer on. I'll say, we'll do it as fast as we can for 15 minutes. I'm just trying to give you some
Yes,
examples.
these are
But,
good. These are good.
yeah, before they go to bed at night, you read them. They sit in their little room. They all are in one room, and they're read a devotion, and they're prayed for, and they sing a song, and they think this is what we do.
Yeah.
This is what all families do. If you can train children into an expectation,
Yeah.
and That's so important because rhythms and routines, knowing what to expect,
Mm-hmm.
talking to a child before they go into church. We're going to use our quiet voice in here.
Mm-hmm.
Mommy is so proud of you. Or, I know that you have such potential to be so strong in your heart, and you tell them what that means when you go
Mm-hmm.
to visit company. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a training, 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 talking, 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 rhythms and routines.
Oh, yes. I love that. Did that come natural to you when your kids were young, or was that something you had to learn? Did somebody else teach you?
No one else taught me. I was kind of I'm very old, and I was kind of doing it all by experiment at the very
Yeah.
beginning. But Clay and I are partners in
Mm-hmm.
everything. We're intuitives on Myers-Briggs, and we talked about ideals and what we
Mm-hmm.
thought. But I had grown to really have a respect for training.
Mm-hmm.
No, not this. And if you read any educational manuals or scientific manuals, you see that children's brain patterns are developed at a very early
Mm.
age. So
Yeah.
whatever you're training in to expect, mommy
Mm-hmm.
loves you, kiss, 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 holding them, loving them,
Yeah.
talking with them, narrating their lives. Now we're going to go into the kitchen and we're going to eat. Now, they're
Mm-hmm.
just taking it and learning all the time, but their little brains want vocabulary and they want direction. And so the
Yes.
more that we can provide that, you're still providing lots of room for creativity, lots of room for
Mm-hmm.
individuality, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
very basic patterns that give
Mm-hmm.
stability and organization to a home.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. And I know that books have been a big part of your life and raising your kids. Was that something you brought in with you? Did you discover your love of books as you raised the kids? Tell us a little bit about that.
I was probably the ADD child in my elementary school. I found school boring and I was always tapping my foot, and Clay and I were actually missionaries in Vienna, Austria, and we were exposed
Mhm.
to a lot of different people. We had a church that had 40 different nationalities. And
Wow.
as we were exposed to all of these incredible people, we thought, wow, we are supposedly educated, but we know nothing. And not
Mhm.
nothing, but we realized we
Yeah.
didn't know authors and musicians and ideas and philosophies and countries and
Yeah.
politics. And so before we even had our first child, we'd never ever heard of home education. We both talked about
Mm.
establishing a home where the finest artists were explored, the best writers were studied,
Mm.
the best that there was in music, the best there was in art, that we wanted to fill our home to give our
Mm.
children an appetite for what was excellent in the world. And then I
Wow.
would I would read of other educators through history, and I thought, literature. I mean, we are people who are created for words and vocabulary.
Mhm.
And I thought reading great stories would give my children patterns for virtue. And I also thought, everything we did was not the norm. I also thought, I'm only going to give my children age graded material like math, one a year, a little bit of language arts, because I want them to all be
Mm.
together and listen to what we're going to
Mm.
do in our educational model.
Wow.
And so we didn't use age graded curriculum for learning science, nature, literature. Everybody learned to,
Wow. Was that
this is
scary for you? Was that like a were you nervous to do that? It sounds so out of the box for that time.
No, because I could see that I made it through school with relatively little effort and
Yeah.
learned, I didn't know about ideas and people and all.
Mm.
And I thought there's nothing I can do that can make it
Mm.
worse. And so I just
Wow.
trusted
Wow.
that had the capacity to think clearly, love the Lord with your mind and I'd learned a lot of that when I was living in Europe with lots of people where we had discussions and
Yeah.
dinners in our home. And I thought, and also in Europe as well as in England, a lot of the education is through discussion and through narrating back. You read
Mhm.
a whole list of books and then you go to your professor and they'll say, defend this idea. What do you think of this? And I thought, that's such a better way to shape minds and thoughts. And
Yeah.
so I did kind of see an example of the mentoring relationship as opposed to the multiple choice and fill in the blank, which is doesn't really
Mm.
create thinking capacity. And so I think that God just wired Clay and me both to be risk takers and to do things
Mhm.
intuitively, that we're wise. And we almost don't conform to any area of life. We were just made that way. I mean,
Well, I
we
respect that.
conform to Scripture, we conform to
Yes.
God's principles. But if somebody just does something because everybody else has always done it, we question it.
Mm. Oh,
So
that's so refreshing. I love that. Well, and so you started homeschooling from the very beginning?
from babyhood on, uh-huh.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And okay, so I definitely want to talk more about education and all of that, but let's shift and just hear a little more about the relationship you built with your kids because I love seeing now today the relationship you have with your adult children, and I know that begins young. So, can you
Hmm.
share some of the things you did just to really establish that firm relationship with your kids?
I think again, my ponder was Christ, and Jesus was the servant leader. He washed 120 men toes. He made
Mm,
meals for his disciples. He walked along the way. He took children in his arms, and repeatedly he said, "They will know you by your love for one another." He told them that they needed to love and forgive one another. He freely loved, and he was really only hostile and angry towards the legalists, the Pharisees. And
mhm,
that's something to
mhm.
totally avoid as a parent, because every single child that you ever will have is different, different personalities, different capacities. And so training for us was take them in your arms. One time, a friend of mine who is very pro child, what would you call it? Smacking. That's what they call it in England, which is terrible. But said, because I know that Clay wrote a book called Heartfelt Discipline, which is really more focused on training in the
Mhm,
heart than it is on some kind of threatening your children and to teach them to be afraid of you. And
mhm,
she said, "But you
mhm,
train all the time." And I said, "Well, of course I do. I want my children to know that they
mhm,
need to love us and respect us and love each other and respect each other." So, I was taking my children in my arms and talking to them and saying what was expected. We taught them the 24 family ways, or I would take them out
mhm,
and say, this is what you need to do if you want to go back in and be with all the other people. We instructed,
mhm.
we trained, and we said, you have a choice to
Yeah.
make. Will training. It's all over Deuteronomy. If you apologize to your brother, if you choose to, you may not look at mommy that way. Or would say, I'm allergic to whining. Oh, I
Mhm.
can't understand whining. If you can
Mhm.
talk in a normal voice, mommy can
Mhm.
listen to you. So we instructed in the ways that we thought would give them a foundation of understanding what we expected. We gave them
Mhm.
grace if they were exhausted because we had exhausted them and really they needed to go into bed. We tried to be age oriented, but the very most important thing for parents is to love and accept and affirm and value and touch and give
Mm.
words of affirmation
Mm.
to the little children. One
Mhm.
time my son said to me,
Wow.
Mommy, when you pay attention to me, I want to obey you. I want to do what you want me to do. But if you ignore me, I'll do
Wow.
whatever I need to do to get attention.
Yeah.
And so we
Oh,
learned as we
yes.
went. We were not perfect, but I think that we became more loving and training and grace oriented as we went because we saw that our children were naturally created, even with wild personalities,
Mhm.
to want to love
Mhm.
and respond to us if we were loving, attentive, and kind and
Yes.
training oriented with them.
Oh, that's all so encouraging. I love it. And I suppose this ties well into the faith training, teaching them about God and scriptures. And then from what I've heard you say more recently, they've all grown up to really have a personal relationship with God that is a big part of their lives right now. So maybe some encouragement for moms who are like, how do I get there one day? It's hard for some parents to imagine that day when they're adults actually walking with the Lord personally. What'd you do to help foster that? And we know that kids have a free will. We know that parents don't have control, but what are some of the things you would encourage parents to do?
Over 800 times in Scripture, God mentions the heart. And so we tried to appeal
Mm,
to their heart. And, we did devotions every morning that when they woke up in the morning, they usually saw me reading my Bible and praying. And they just thought that's what adults
mhm,
do. And so we
mm,
would pray and discuss. I wrote a book about this, but the Life Giving Table, we had
mhm.
meals together most every night, had big
Yep.
discussions, talked about every possible thing in the world, asked them, what do you think? Well, why do you think he did that? Well, how would
Mm,
you evaluate that? Was it, and we talked
mhm.
about God morning, noon, and night, just in our natural conversation. Oh my goodness, can you believe that God made such a beautiful sunset? I think that pink must have been one of his favorite colors. Or what mood was God in when
Mhm.
he created our golden retriever as a golden, wonderful puppy? Or I'm so grateful, or I'm really feeling angry today. Would you mind if would you pray with
Mhm.
mommy that I'll be more patient? So it was an organic
Mm.
love for God. You have
Yeah.
to love your God in front of your children because, in a sense,
Yes.
you are God to them. If you're walking
Mm,
with the Lord and you're growing little by little in being patient, loving, kind, honest, virtuous, whatever, it's little by little.
mhm.
I'm still
Right.
very self
Yeah.
centered, making mistakes, and God corrects me, and I'm still growing. But the most important
Yes.
thing is to have integrity, to worship God and to
Mm.
do what Christ would want us to do in front of them so that our words matched our model.
Absolutely. Yes. More is caught than taught in all of that. And I always say that's something you can't fake, right? It has to be an authentic overflow. And yet I love too your focus on rhythms and routines in the home, because I do think that it's normal for mom and dad to read God's word, right? It's normal for us to recognize his creation. And then that just becomes a part of, ingrained in who they are as well. So, oh,
Hmm.
I love that. Okay. So cast a quick vision for your relationship with them now as adults, and I just would love to hear. My oldest is 24, so I'm a few years behind you, but I'm starting to experience what it's like to have real friendships with my sons as they become young men. So tell us what that's
Hmm.
like now.
I was surprised because I hadn't had this kind of a family, but our friendship just grew over years. We had spent our time together.
Mhm.
We read the same books. We loved the same music. We traveled all over the world together. And, all children, I think, in their own way, introverts and extroverts, want to push their
Mhm.
boundaries a little bit when they become young adults. They want to have their
Mm.
own ideas. They want to explore their muscles. They also want people to love them. But if
Mm.
you have earned a close relationship, if you've spent the time, if you've listened, if you've understood and talked and instructed, then when they're teenagers, you're the one they're going to want to talk to. And then when they're young adults, and
Mhm.
all of my kids went through I may never come home stage, I'm going to go out into the world and change it. And then all of them, we all love to be together. I talk to my kids, they
Yeah.
live all over the world, multiple times
Yeah.
every week. I spend lots of time with
Mhm.
them. They counsel me, I
Mhm.
counsel them, but oddly, they all are kind of, they're all authors. They're all
Yeah.
theologians. A couple of them got their PhDs and are teaching in universities, and another one got her master's of
Amazing.
theology in Oxford, and she's teaching, writing, speaking, and then Nathan does a podcast. I mean, it was just our family culture. We loved the Lord
Yes.
together.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
know that it's a very tempting world, but we stayed pretty close.
Mm.
We were very home centered. And I'll say the final thing that I think really clicked with them is we hosted conferences, and they were a part
Mm.
of ministering to people from the time they were very little.
Mm.
I would say, you know what? You're going to
Yeah.
make these parents smile. They're all
Mm.
tired and they have difficulties with their children just like
Mm.
we have at home. But when you're polite and kind to them, it gives them hope. I'm so thankful you're serving with us.
Mm,
And they would be with us as we
yeah.
prayed for all the people that were at our conferences. And so they got to see other adults
Mhm.
praying, and they were part of
Good.
serving people. So they developed a self image of,
Mhm.
oh, I have something to give. And so it's not just about
Mm.
giving them the right, the exact right. Did I say the right words? Did I go over all the right verses? No, it's
Mhm.
just it's an
Yeah.
organic, life giving, over a
Mhm.
lifetime, they begin to perceive
Mhm.
themselves as those who will serve Christ. So that we're having something
Sure.
for your children to serve in really kind of clicks all of the
Mhm.
theology.
I love that, and it seems that homeschooling worked. They they're pretty smart, all of them.
I didn't think they were. I mean, I
Oh,
thought, oh no, have we done enough of this and that? Because we just did
or
what we knew how to do, not realizing that
mm,
our goal for them was to love
yeah.
learning and to give them tools for
Mhm.
research and for
Yes.
creativity. And they had a
Mhm.
lot more time than most of their peers had
Mhm.
to grow
Yeah.
intellectually,
Right.
to thrive, to build mental muscle. And so I think that a lot of
Mhm.
worry that parents have in home education isn't
Mhm.
necessary. They're going to be
Yeah.
fine, but
Yeah.
hopefully they'll also
Yeah.
love the Lord and be virtuous.
Yes. Oh, so good. All of that. Well, I would love to shift gears just for the last couple minutes here and just ask a couple questions about the homeschool specific experience. We've already touched on some of that, but I'm encouraging parents in this topic of raising well-rounded homeschoolers. I think a lot of parents fear when they might be so focused on the academics that their first concern is often socialization, which I'm sure you have thoughts on. But then beyond that, you know, making sure that they do develop other skills and interests and passions, and you've done such a beautiful job of that. Can you talk about how you incorporated academics, which are part of school, but also all these other beautiful interests and passions that your kids developed?
We we felt like we were supposed to give them what we had, not what everybody else had. And Clay and I are both
Mhm.
musical. We're both writers. Our kids would never be asked to do your accounting. We just knew that that wasn't what we were going to give to them. They can all do enough math
Mhm,
right now to
mhm.
do their accounting for taxes. They hate taxes. But we just we just incorporated into our lives what we enjoyed. We were oftentimes in missions or speaking in different places, so they loved the world. That's why we read too much Tolkien and
Mm.
Lewis. That's why they're all in the UK.
I
But
love
we would just kind of put a plan ahead of time. Once a month we're going to go to a concert or a play or
Mm.
whatever. We would take them as they got older
Mhm.
to individual conferences. Like one of my children was a magician and he did magic shows for kids' birthday parties.
Mhm.
And so he went to a Christian magician conference with Clay. Another one was very
Yeah.
musical, so he would take him to music conferences where there were performances and where people could talk to him and where he could see different kind of, people. These were,
Mhm.
not all the time, but we planned ahead of time for this.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
I think that when people become concerned about socialization, if the parents are strong in relationships and have hospitality in their home and can relate to
Mhm.
people, to all people,
Mhm.
then their children are
Mhm.
most probably also going to be socialized. If their parents are fear oriented
Cool.
or harsh or controlling or critical
Mm.
of other people and groups, their children are going to grow up weird and odd and be
Mm.
embarrassing. I
Yes.
mean, it's
Yes.
not that we haven't produced a bunch of people that we're embarrassed of in the home education movement, but we've also produced a lot
Right.
of people who are wonderful and
Mm.
loving and compassionate. So
Yes.
the seeds you plant
Mhm.
are going to grow into the kind of fruit that you nurtured.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. So with that, because I have this picture in my mind after reading your books and listening to you of this home with music and books and artwork and all these beautiful, wonder-filled experiences. But academics, of course, are part of homeschooling. Did you ever have a time, and I know a little bit of this already, but can you share with us about a time where maybe one of your kids just was unmotivated, didn't want to do their schoolwork? And if so, how did you help them find that motivation to get done what had to be done?
We never talked about academics and we never gave our children grades. So if they,
Okay.
if the only thing, my kids thought that home education was math because everything else to them was a pleasure. Did my children fuss? Of
Sure.
course they fussed. He touched my toe. I don't care if he touched your toe. You have a choice to make. I will read the
Yeah.
whole book over again if you all can't. No, I'm teasing, kind of. We had to train a correct. That's again, we did the 24 family ways, so they knew what were our basics, and we could
Mhm.
correct them from that. But no, honestly, I was living in a couple of different states that had mandatory testing. And I remember one
Sure.
time going into a second grade testing where they had second grade testing, and I apologized to God. I said, God, I know I haven't done enough. We've moved 4 times in the last 2 years, and I haven't covered as much as I should, but please help this child at least get, passing. And the child was at
Mhm.
99 percentile in everything. And I started
Oh my
thinking,
goodness. Wow.
oh, so children were made to absorb great books and
Yes.
ideas and vocabulary. And so we did not
Mm.
worry from the time they were little.
Yeah.
And even before that,
I
we
love it.
didn't worry about academics. I mean, they've all
Okay.
made it through Oxford and St. Andrews and
I was gonna
Cambridge and
say,
Nathan. And yeah, they've all done well because they exercised their
sure.
brains. They learned to think.
Yes.
Don't put them on
Yeah.
machines. Kids learn in the same
Mm.
way that you get to have muscle from exercising your muscle.
Mhm.
They exercise their brains. They have to solve puzzles and problems and
Absolutely.
create things and write music
Mm.
and write you know essays and books. And
Mhm.
a home has always been enough. And every family will be different. Some people aren't going to be word
Mm.
nerds. Some people are going to be mechanics.
Mhm.
Some people are going to be farmers. Some people, the most
Mhm.
important thing is to understand that your child has capacity and you give them a sense of agency. I can't make you into a great
Mm.
person, but I see so much potential in your life. You'll have to decide how you're going to discipline yourself to
Mm.
access all of the things that you dream of becoming. And it's putting in them a drive to be excellent and to work hard. And everybody
Yes.
needs to get a copy of Awakening
Mm.
Wonder because that was written at the end of my home
That's
education
what
after all my kids
oh,
had come. It was
yeah.
after they had left home that
Y
I said, no, 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 these are the most important things.
yes, that has inspired me so much. I've loved hearing it from that perspective, especially looking back. And it's so good. And the 24 Family Ways. Well, I'll be linking to a number of books over in show notes, but Awakening Wonder is definitely the one that I'm thinking of as we're having this conversation about homeschooling. And yeah, I mean, I think when I use the word academics, I'm just thinking of those things we have to check boxes on, especially if they want to go to college. But somehow you are able to navigate getting them into college. And I don't know if it's the same today as it was back then, but I know a lot of parents that would be a concern of theirs. Like, well, don't I have to do these certain things?
Well, my
Yeah.
children never did math after ninth grade.
Okay.
I just thought these are going to be art students. These are going to be literary students. So
Mhm.
they took the
Mm.
pre-SAT and then we just circled whatever because 65% of SATs are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Most parents don't know that.
Mm.
And the other
Mhm.
thing is, I hired a math tutor for 1 week after they took the PSAT tests. And she
Mm.
went over the problems they didn't understand, gave them a logarithm calculator, and said, I think you'll do fine. And in
Wow.
just a week and a half, or something like that,
Mm.
they were able to access, instead of having to take all of the advanced courses, they had what they
Mm.
needed to do well on their SATs.
Mm. Wow.
And
Beautiful.
in all the other areas, they were adequate because we'd read and explored and gone to museums and everything else on science and nature and literature and
Incredible.
history and vocabulary, and because we wanted to spend our time on the things that actually really fed their imagination and their
Mm.
intellect.
That's so cool. And I love what you referred to earlier. Just they knew how to exercise their brains. So then when they had to look at a story problem or something, they knew how to think. You had given them the opportunity to be thinkers. And I think in our world today, that's more important than ever because there's going to be a lot of challenging messages, whether it has to do with, world issues, cultural issues, and raising thinkers is really important. So I think you've done a great job of that.
Especially biblically. And I would say that what parents need to fear more than their test scores is there's a
Mhm.
very secular culture out there. It's a tempting
Mhm.
culture. It's evil. It's vile. It's pervasive in
Mhm.
every area of life,
Mhm.
from movies to television to. And if you give your children a sense of how to think and how to apply the truths of Scripture and how to develop convictions, then when they
Mhm.
are confronted by the culture, they're already practiced in knowing how to use truth to access
Mhm.
wisdom in their lives. And of course, we have developed that strong relationship, so we're right there every day. Let me
Yes.
bribe you. I'll take you out for coffee. What are you thinking? How can I help you? You
Yes.
know,
Ah,
but I think that I would fear more the world
mm,
for our children,
absolutely.
but give them a
Yes.
vision for becoming lights in a dark world. Help them to know they'll have
Yes.
temptation. Help them to know that they have the potential for being
Mhm.
strong.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, that's so good. So good. Such great conversations. Well, I'm super encouraged and will be, of course, linking to Awakening Wonder as well as many of your other books that have really inspired me in my home, in my family, and in homeschooling. But if you have a final word of encouragement, you've shared a lot already, but I want to leave us with one nugget of encouragement for all the parents out there. Maybe they've got little kids. They may or may not be homeschooling, but they're trying to raise up these little kids to be lights in the world. What's a final word of encouragement?
well, first of all, just really quick, tell us about your book that's coming out and why did you write it? What's the main thought behind it?
Oh, I love that you asked that. Well, because I've written two other parenting books, and I haven't ever focused a lot on homeschooling because I think I'm aware that the majority still out there aren't homeschoolers, and I want to offer encouragement to everyone. But at one
Hmm.
point, and I tell this story in my book, Becoming Homeschoolers, tell the story that one day I was writing and talking to my husband, and it occurred to me that homeschooling wasn't just a little nice part of my boys' story, but that it was really the main story. In fact, I say that next to their relationship with God, homeschooling has been the greatest shaping factor in their life, simply because of the hours it gave us all together and to, like you shared, explore, learn, create, be free to be who God made them to be and not to feel some pressure to conform to something and somebody else. So once I realized, like, wait a minute, I don't think I've been inauthentic in my writing. I mean, everything I share is my heart for parenting, intentional parenting and faith formation and all those things. But I felt like the full story would be that homeschooling is a really big part of our life as a family.
So
And
true,
I
so true.
yeah, and that there's nothing I would rather share with the world than, for those on the fence, especially in the world today going, "I don't think I could do it, could I?" And I'm like, "That was me, that was me. I didn't think I
Yeah.
could do it, but I am so glad that I took the leap." And so really this book is sharing our story, sharing my heart, but also a lot of research. I open with 20 good reasons to homeschool. And these are just for those people that are like, oh, hadn't thought of that. So it's just giving
Hmm.
people that nudge to maybe get off the fence and give it a try, as well as it's a guidebook. I did the work and the research to say, hey, from preschool to college, here's what you need to know. Let's not overcomplicate it. I share tons of resources and encouragement. And then I've got some chapters on extracurriculars, on sports. We're a big sports family. So how do you navigate sports as a homeschooler? And so it's so much of my heart. It really was, I will say, my favorite book I've written so far, just because it was such a joy to get to share this really special part of our family's adventures.
I'm so glad. Well, that it makes sense, and I've thought a lot about that lately because I do have so many friends whose children were not homeschooled and weren't able to do it. But I've looked back, and I feel like throughout history, children have been more
Mm.
home-centered. Geniuses have been more
Mhm.
home-centered,
Yes.
whatever, creatives, artists, whatever. And so I think that's a great idea. I think it'll help many people. They just
Mm.
need encouragement.
Mhm.
We did the same when we wrote our
Mhm.
first book because we wanted people to know, that this really mattered.
Mhm.
But I would say my last
Mhm.
parting word is you are exactly the parent that God created for your children to need.
Right,
You
right.
you will give them things that no one else will give them. You will have concerns
Mhm.
or favorite occupations on your heart that are unique to your family. You might be a great cook, you might be an
Mhm.
architect, whatever. And it's so rewarding to invest in a human being whose life
Mm.
goes into the world whole, emotionally strong, spiritually vibrant.
Mm.
And you can
Yeah.
do this, and you don't have to know it all at once. You learn little by little. My children thought that I had been well educated because I was learning about the same books, the same people at the same time that they were. But they didn't know that it was
Yeah.
my first
Yeah.
time to be exposed to
Right?
biographies and countries and yeah. And just give yourself time. Love your children
Mhm.
well,
Mm.
give yourself grace and cultivate in yourself an excellent heart. You will grow in ways that you love because
Mm.
you're
Mhm.
accountable to your children and your heart is what they're going to
Yeah.
draw from, your heart and your mind. So
Mm.
there, that's all I can say
Yes.
quickly.
Oh, so great. Okay, and then lastly, I'm so excited to hear that you have another book coming out. Can you share a little bit about
Oh, you're
what we can
sweet.
look forward to?
I think, I love writing and I love my books, but in the fall, I'm coming out with, I think it's my favorite book because it's a picture book.
Mm.
It's not, it's
Ah.
a large, you might consider it a coffee table book with hundreds of pictures and a lot of
Mm.
subjects covered on from marriage to home to children to delight to difficulties to
Mm.
forgiveness to and it's a reflection of my life while I was based in Oxford.
Mhm.
It's Ponderings from Oxford,
Mm.
and it's called Well Lived. And I just kind of wanted to
Mm.
say these are the things that mattered. And so it's coming out, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited about it, mainly because it's so fun to do a picture book. I got to go with photographers in all these different
Mm.
places, and so it was a lot of fun. I'm excited about that.
Oh,
Well Lived is what it's called.
oh, I can't wait for that. And your tea time discipleship was also lovely. That had quite a few
That was
photos
a
in it as
picture book
well.
too. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm just going to end up with picture books. There we go.
They are beautiful. Well, when you've got scenes like that, you gotta share it. So, well, Sally, thank you so much. I've been encouraged, and I'm sure everyone listening has been as well. So appreciate your time and just can't wait to continue to learn from you and follow you.
Thank you. Well, the Lord bless you and bless your writing and your speaking. This has been a real fun time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally.
Bye bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.